So, let's play out a scenario today. It's a scenario that I think haunts the dreams of anyone who has ever actually signed the front of a paycheck. You run a business.
Oh yeah, the ultimate nightmare.
Right. And it doesn't even matter if it's, a high-end boutique in downtown Lufkin or a massive manufacturing floor over in Longview. You've got margins to hit, you've got staff to manage, and a reputation to maintain.
The stakes are literally always high when it's your own business.
Exactly. So picture this. It's 6:12 a.m. You walk in, you've got your coffee in hand, ready for the Tuesday morning rush. And then you hear it.
Oh no, the sound.
The sound of running water where there absolutely shouldn't be running water. Or maybe you smell smoke from a break room toaster fire that happened overnight.
That is the universal oh no moment right there.
It really is. And your lizard brain just immediately screams one instruction: stop. Shut it down. Lock the front doors. Put up that little close for repair sign. You instantly go into protective mode thinking, I cannot let a single customer see this mess.
Well, yeah, because that is the default setting for human beings.
Yeah.
It's totally intuitive. You have a mess, you clean the mess, and then you reopen. It's a very linear way of thinking.
Right. But today, we are doing a deep dive into a set of documents that essentially says that exact linear thinking is going to bankrupt you. We're looking at some fascinating excerpts from Restoration Strategies for Commercial Continuity, specifically focusing on a section they call Episode 7. And the core mission of our dive today is to explore this concept they introduced called Commercial Restoration Authority.
And it's such a radical pivot from how we usually think. I mean,
Yeah.
this isn't a manual on how to use a mop or an air scrubber. It's actually a treatise on economics.
Yeah, the core argument is basically whatever you do, do not lock that door.
Exactly. It completely reframes disaster recovery. It moves it from being just a facility maintenance issue to a revenue protection issue,
Yes.
which is a huge mental leap.
Revenue protection. I love that phrase, but, that's a term you usually hear in corporate boardrooms, not when you're standing angled up in dirty water. But let's really unpack the central premise here because it is bold. I mean, the whole text revolves around this idea of when businesses can't afford to close.
And I'll tell you, that title isn't just hyperbole to get your attention. The document lays out a primary insight that I think a lot of business owners just completely overlook until it's way too late. The quote from the text is, downtime often costs more than repairs.
Okay, I have to challenge that immediately because if I'm a business owner and I'm looking at a quote for major commercial water extraction, we're talking an industrial dehumidifiers, tear out, full reconstruction, that is a massive, massive number. That check is physically painful to write. Are you really telling me the downtime costs more than that?
I know it feels completely counterintuitive, but the source material asks us to look at what they call the iceberg of costs. The repair bill, that big check you're writing, that's just the tip of the iceberg. It's the visible cost. But you have to ask, what's under the waterline?
You mean like beyond just losing the sales from the cash register for that one day?
Precisely. Let's actually break down the math the way the text implies. Obviously, yes, you lose the gross revenue for every single hour your doors are locked. That's the easy math. But while your revenue hits absolute zero, what happens to your expenses?
Well, yeah, the landlord doesn't care that a pipe burst in the ceiling. Rent is still due on the 1st.
Rent is due. Your insurance premiums are due. Those expensive equipment leases you signed, due. And probably most importantly, your payroll. Unless you plan on laying off your entire staff the second a disaster hits, which, let's face it, is a complete morale nightmare, you are likely paying highly skilled people to literally sit at home on their couches.
So you're burning cash at your normal everyday burn rate, but with zero fuel coming into the engine.
That's the business interruption factor right there.
Yeah.
But there is a third layer that this source alludes to, which I honestly think is the most dangerous of all. It's this concept of customer habituation.
Customer habituation. Okay, break that down for me.
So humans are creatures of habit. Think about your own life. Let's say you run a local coffee shop, or maybe a dry cleaner. Your customers come to you because it is deeply ingrained in their routine. Tuesday morning, 8:90 a.m., they always stop at your place.
Right, it's just muscle memory at that point.
Exactly. So if you are closed this particular Tuesday because of a maintenance issue, they don't just skip coffee for the day. They go to your competitor right down the street.
Ah, and maybe they realize the competitor's coffee is actually pretty good.
There you go. You haven't just lost the $4 or $5 for that one latte. You might have just broken the habit loop that kept them coming back to you for years. If you are closed for, say, 3 days, you are essentially forcing your loyal customer base to go build a relationship with someone else.
Wow.
Yeah, that long-term lifetime value loss is astronomical when you compare it to the cost of bringing in a water extraction team.
That's genuinely terrifying when you put it like that. It changes the whole calculation from how much to fix the drywall to how much to keep my best customer.
And that is exactly why the authority quote in the text is so stark. It says, closing one day can cost more than the cleanup. It's not just about the cash register today. It's about your entire market share tomorrow.
Okay, so if we as business owners accept that premise that closing the doors is the ultimate enemy, we run into a very practical wall. It's super easy to say, don't close, but if I have 2 inches of standing water in my lobby or soot covering the ceiling from a fire, I can't just pretend it's not there.
Right, you can't just ignore it.
It's unsafe, it's ugly, it smells terrible. How do you actually pull this off without completely ruining the customer experience and driving them away anyway?
That's where the strategy part of restoration strategies really comes into play. The text doesn't just vaguely say stay open. It actually gives us 3 specific pillars of operational continuity. These are concrete tactics to essentially fix the plane while you're still flying it.
I like that analogy. Let's look at the first one from the text, phased restoration.
This is essentially triage for your commercial building. The force suggests that instead of viewing the restoration as one giant, overwhelming project, the building is damaged, we must shut down and fix the entire building, you break it down into functional zones.
So rather than shutting down the whole restaurant because the kitchen flooded, maybe you just shut down the prep area and run a limited menu for a few days.
Exactly. Or if you're a big retail store and the roof leaks specifically in the men's department, you don't close the entire store. You just isolate the men's department. You treat the restoration as a series of small surgical projects rather than one massive facility-wide shutdown.
But man, that requires a ton of coordination. You'd need a restoration team that actually understands your specific workflow. Because if they start ripping up carpet in the main aisle right during the lunch rush, your phased restoration fails miserably.
Oh, it fails completely. It would be chaos. That leads perfectly into the second and probably most critical tactic mentioned in episode 7, after-hours mitigation.
Now, I read that and it seems obvious on the surface, right? Work when people aren't there. But the text actually treats this as a specific service capability, not just a casual preference.
It absolutely has to be a specific capability. Think about the heavy lifting involved in commercial restoration. We are talking about industrial dehumidifiers, air movers that literally sound like jet engines, tearing out soggy drywall, hauling heavy debris out the front door. You simply cannot do that while a client is trying to have a quiet meeting or a customer is trying to buy a shirt.
So the strategy is essentially invisibility.
Yes, invisibility. The Commercial Restoration Authority acts like a team of elves. They come in at 6:00 p.m. right when you lock up for the day. They work aggressively until 5:00 a.m. Then, and this is the key part, they clean up, pack up all the noisy gear, and vanish completely before your first employee even clocks in.
So the business owner walks in the next morning and maybe the wall is patched or the carpet is in the process of drying, but the chaos of construction is just gone.
Exactly. It preserves the illusion of normalcy. And that illusion is exactly what protects the revenue. Because if a customer walks in and sees a literal construction zone, they instantly perceive risk or lower quality. But if they see a functioning business, even if it's a little improvised in the corner, they proceed as normal.
But you can't hide everything, right? I mean, sometimes you have to leave equipment running or there's a giant hole in the ceiling that physically cannot be fixed in one single night. What do you do then?
That's where the third tactic comes in, which is safety zones. And I want to get just a little technical here for a second because the text makes it clear this isn't just about putting up some cheap yellow caution tape and calling it a day.
Yeah, yellow tape doesn't exactly stop drywall dust or mold spores from floating around.
Exactly. When the source discusses safety zones in the context of operational continuity, we're talking about engineering a true physical separation between the hazard and the public. This usually involves what they call hard containment.
Meaning actual temporary walls.
Real walls. Heavy plastic barriers with heavy-duty zipper doors, tension poles holding it all up, and very often negative air pressure systems.
Okay, stop right there. Explain the negative air pressure part. Why does a boutique owner or a restaurant manager need to care about negative air pressure?
Because if you are back there sanding drywall or mitigating black mold in one room, and that toxic dust drifts out into your retail space or lands on your customer's food, you have a massive, massive liability on your hands. Negative air pressure ensures that when someone unzips that plastic door to walk in or out, Air only sucks into the work zone. It physically prevents the microscopic contaminants from escaping out into the clean business area.
So it's basically creating a quarantine zone inside the building.
That's exactly what it is. It allows you to run a messy construction site and a clean business side by side, totally separated by a physical and atmospheric barrier. It's what allows you to confidently tell your customers, excuse our dust, without them actually having to eat any dust.
That is such a crucial distinction because it protects the occupant's health, but it also protects the business from devastating lawsuits.
And don't forget, it creates a visual barrier too. Out of sight, out of mind. If the mess is hidden behind a clean white plastic wall, the customer just ignores it and shops. If they see the actual mess, they worry and they leave.
Okay, so we have phased restoration, after-hours mitigation, and safety zones. These are the three main tools. But I really want to go back to the who of this whole thing, because this sounds amazing in theory, but I've hired contractors before. Trying to get a standard contractor to show up at 8 p.m., work all night long, and be totally gone by dawn, that is just not how most of the construction world operates.
You are absolutely right. The average contractor works 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. If you call a standard repair crew for a flood, they're going to want to work during your business hours because, well, that's their business hours.
Which completely defeats the whole purpose of revenue protection that we just talked about.
Exactly. Which is why the source material doesn't just leave it as an abstract theory. It explicitly highlights a specific provider who does this. ServiPro of Lufkin, Nacogdoches, Longview.
Okay, so why does the text single them out specifically? Is it just local branding, or is there a functional difference in how they operate?
It's the functional capability specifically tied to that after-hours requirement we discussed. The text highlights their 24/7 emergency services.
But, a lot of companies slap 204/7 on their trucks. Usually that just means an answering service takes a message and tells you they'll call you back on Monday.
Right, but in this context, based on the very specific continuity strategies we just discussed, 204/7 means actual operational readiness. It means they literally have crews willing and ready to work the vampire shift. If your whole survival strategy relies on after-hours mitigation, you cannot hire a 9-to-5 vendor. You need a partner whose entire business model is built around off-hours execution.
That makes perfect sense. It's a logic puzzle, really. If you need to be open during the day to make money, the messy work must happen at night. Therefore, the provider must be nocturnal.
And speed is the other massive factor here. We talked earlier about how downtime costs more than repairs. Well, that implies that every single hour of delay is bleeding cash out of your business. If a pipe bursts at 2 a.m. on a Saturday,
Which is always when it happens, the worst possible time.
exactly, and you wait until Monday morning at 8 a.m. to call someone, that water has been sitting and soaking for 48 hours. The damage has migrated to the drywall, mold has already started to incubate, and your repair bill just effectively tripled. But more importantly, you are now definitely closed on Monday.
Whereas if you have a provider who actually picks up the phone at 2 a.m.,
They are on site by 4 a.m. They extract the standing water immediately. They set up the safety zones and the commercial drying equipment. And by 8 a.m. that same Saturday, you might actually be able to open the front doors to the public.
wow, that kind of speed is literally the difference between a glitch in operations and a full-blown disaster.
It's the difference between making revenue today and making zero.
Now, the text actually mentions a specific number for this region. It's 936-715-3804. And I guess in the context of what we're discussing, that phone number isn't just a basic contact. It's almost like a required tool in your business continuity plan.
Think of it exactly like a fire extinguisher. You don't wait to buy a fire extinguisher until the fire actually starts in the kitchen. You have it on the wall ready to go. Similarly, you do not want to be desperately Googling restoration companies near me while water is actively pouring into your server room. You want the number of the Commercial Restoration Authority already programmed into your phone.
Because by the time you scroll through Google, find a vendor, negotiate a price, and finally get them on site, you've already lost the revenue protection battle. The damage is done.
Exactly. The source material emphasizes that restoration protects revenue, but I would take it a step further and argue that preparedness protects revenue. Knowing exactly who to call before the crisis hits is 90% of the battle.
It's really shifting the mindset of the business owner from looking for a vendor to finding a partner, because a vendor just comes in and fixes a broken toilet. A partner understands that if this retail store doesn't open its doors tomorrow morning, we have a major economic problem.
And that partner deeply needs to understand the local landscape too. The text specifies Lufkin, Nacogdoches, Longview. These are areas in East Texas that see very specific types of weather events, severe storms, sudden deep freezes. A giant national call center might not fully grasp the urgency of a regional freeze event that's busting pipes all over town, but a local franchise absolutely does. They can mobilize their resources so much faster.
So let's zoom out a bit to wrap this up. We've covered the brutal math of downtime, the specific tactics of keeping the doors open, and the type of specialized help required. But I keep getting stuck on this central idea of commercial restoration authority.
It's a very powerful phrase.
It sounds super confident, but, confidence alone doesn't dry a wet floor. What does that authority actually look like in practice when the worst happens?
It looks like someone stepping in and taking complete control of the chaos. Think about it when a disaster happens. There is an immediate power vacuum. The business owner is panicking about money, the staff is confused and standing around. A true authority steps into that room and says, okay, here is the plan. We will zone off this specific area. We will work tonight while you sleep. You will open for business tomorrow.
Man, that removes so much decision fatigue from the business owner.
Correct. It allows the business owner to just breathe, step back, and go back to doing what they actually do best, running their business, while the restoration team handles the crisis. It clearly separates the business interruption from the business operation.
It's funny, when we started this deep dive, I really thought we were just going to talk about water damage and smoke cleanup. But this whole conversation is really about fundamental business resilience.
It absolutely is. The water or the fire, that's just the variable. The constant is the business's desperate need for ongoing revenue.
And looking at the source material, specifically how episode 7 breaks it all down, it forces you to look at your own operation and ask some really uncomfortable questions.
Like what? What comes to mind for you?
Well, we talked about how fragile that customer habit loop is. It makes me wonder, how many businesses out there are operating on such thin margins or with such tenuous customer loyalty that a simple 3-day shutdown would actually be fatal to the company?
And that is the truly provocative thought here, isn't it? We so often think of business bankruptcy as this long, slow decline years of bad sales and poor management. But the source implies that bankruptcy can actually be a sudden, catastrophic event triggered simply by a lack of operational continuity.
One disaster away.
Exactly. If a single day of being closed costs more than the cleanup itself, and you don't have the massive cash reserves to handle that lost day plus the repair bill, you are essentially walking a tightrope every single day without a net.
And let's be real, most small to medium businesses do not have massive cash reserves just sitting around.
No, they don't. They live and die on cash flow. And business interruption stops the flow dead in its tracks. That's why the strategy of revenue protection isn't just some corporate luxury for the Fortune 500. It's basic survival.
So the big takeaway for the listener isn't just go buy better insurance or install better plumbing. It's have a bulletproof plan to keep your front doors unlocked no matter what.
Have a plan. Truly understand what phased restoration looks like for your specific floor plan. Know that you can and should demand after-hours mitigation from your contractors. And most importantly, know exactly who you are going to call to execute it at 2 a.m.
It's empowering, in a way, because you can't stop the pipe from bursting. That's just nature. But you absolutely can stop the business from breaking.
You can completely control the outcome, even if you can't control the triggering event.
I think that's the perfect place to leave it for today. For everyone listening right now, take a hard look at your own continuity plan. Do you actually have one? Or is your plan just, I hope nothing breaks today?
Hope is definitely not a strategy.
It certainly isn't. And if you happen to be operating in the Lufkin, Nacogdoches, or Longview area, maybe do yourself a favor and put that number 936-715-3804 somewhere safe in your contacts. Consider it a little bit of free revenue insurance.
I couldn't agree more. Better safe than shut down.
Thanks for diving in with us today. It's been a massive eye-opener on the hidden, terrifying costs of an empty building.
Always a pleasure to unpack the details with you.
We'll catch you all on the next deep dive. Stay dry out there.